Chaos is orderly. I had made the decision to join the fight against the Kondo community long ago, but never revealed why. My decision was paved not long after my 12th, when I had accompanied my friend into Welcome to Bloxburg, the second most popular game at the time. She enjoyed it to the point she played it every day, often asking me to accompany her. She had been by far outclassing me in every aspect: schoolwork, public speaking, Roblox experience, though my own contentment caused me to take joy in furthering her abilities rather than my own. Yet, a drop of bitterness was certainly involved. My friend's talent was matched by her preference for chaos. While I had been making money for her, she actively trolls other users with ridiculous dialogue, obstructing building entrances with vehicles, and other activities that I never knew. When one retains a level of success exceeding your own, despite contrasting with every value you've held, how could you not feel at least slightly resentful? For this, my interest in history increased steadily, and this development became the precursor to my enthusiasm in English and psychology. From morning to night in my free time, my pursuit of knowledge drove me to one topic after another, but thanks to disorder thriving in my experiences, it was always the collapse of societies that held my primary interest. From the Roman Empire's external exploitation of political instability to the Soviet Union's gradual application of individual autonomy, I had become so confident in my knowledge of order and chaos that when the time for me to apply them occurred, it struck as a bolt from the blue. 2 years had passed from my introduction to the game, until my friend talked to me in person. She had revealed that 2 other users managed to bypass Roblox scripts, grabbing her avatar, forcibly brought her to their house, and did explicit actions. Such ability had been out of the question for me, which added to my horror when I learned that this had happened before. Certainly, it had proven
unlikely this will be the last time such a hack occurs.
At odds with myself, it had been incomprehensible to me that I had never foreseen such an event happening when I learned about Roblox. For what I had just learned suddenly reminded me of the conflict that I had long been afflicted, the drive to understand disorder that had brought me to an interest in history in the first place. In a few days I myself knew that I should join the fight against the Kondo, or as I understood at the time online data, community, which I had identified the players my friend encountered to be part of. To be sure, it was an incredibly hard road, for the abilities of a group, let alone a user, in propagating change were sorely limited. One could not attend to a target audience of hundreds of thousands without significantly popular games or videos, and these needed a combination of content popularity, audience determination, and outstanding luck. I had none of all this. The fulfillment of the Kondo community's destruction seemed impossible. When I was unexpectedly promoted to leader of the ODH, my old confidence had returned and my goal was now clear and definite before my eyes. I wanted to become a well-known anti-Kondo YouTuber, believing obstacles do not exist to be surrendered to, but to be broken. I was determined to overcome these obstacles, keeping before my eyes the goal to address and motivate the Roblox community against Kondos. I had a larger foundation to build on, and hence my possibilities in the struggle were further reaching, and what then seemed to be the wounds of disorder, I praise today as opportunities for wisdom and reflection. I owe it to the opportunities that I grew adaptable and still am adaptable to this day. And even more, I appreciate my new position for motivating me to become a decent YouTube animator, for granting me an avenue to metaphorically address the prime issue without following the route of long essays or irrelevant gameplay, for hurling me, despite all the chaos surrounding me, into a world of responsibility, thus making me further acquainted with both my allies and enemies. It takes luck to see an opportunity, and skill to successfully utilize it. Foresight is blind. In the period of my leadership under the ODH, my eyes were opened to two traitors of whose terrible importance for the existence of the anti-Kondo community I had yet to fully counter: futility and disbelief. To me, leading the ODH, the group that many see it as one of the strongest forces against Kondos at the time, represents, I am sorry to say, merely the saddest representation of public efforts against Kondos. Even today, reminiscing about the ODH can arouse thoughts of dismay and regret. For me, the history of this group represents 3 years of the same mistakes I addressed today. 3 years in which I was governed by a false sense of pride, in which the ODH compiled and reported toxic communities and troll fanbases rather than genuine threats, a truly squandered opportunity in which I eventually failed to retain consistency in the ODH's objectives. Delusion was then my faithful bodyguard. He never left me for a moment and shared all I prided myself on. Every Kondo group band aroused his interest. Infiltration in Kondo groups prompted his attentions for days at a time. My life was a continuous journey with this incompetent ally. And yet during this time I studied as never before, this time about Kondo players specifically. Aside from my favored school subjects, or my raids, spamming messages in Kondo groups, and reports against Kondo groups, I had but one interest: research. At that time I compiled knowledge enormously and thoroughly. All the free time school and leadership left me was employed in studying behaviors. In this way I forged in less than a year's time the foundations of psychology from which I still convert into wisdom today. In this period there took shape within me a world picture and a philosophy which became the bedrock foundation of all my acts. In addition to what I then learned, I have had to create little, and have had to alter nothing. Today I am firmly convinced that on the whole all realistic ideas appear with proper knowledge and wisdom, both of which are rare, let alone embodied, within the public perception. I distinguish between the acknowledgement of knowledge, consisting solely of facts left to ferment without purpose, and the application of wisdom, which identifies the patterns observable in experience, but fails to identify the correct tools to adjust them in individuals or society. Disbelieving that identifying such effective methods are possible, especially within the anti-Kondo community, is what ensures the importance of action is demonstrated in far too few. It has always been, in history, this pursuit of knowledge and wisdom which provides the building materials and plans respectively, from which its future possessors takes the brick, spreads the mortar, and continues the wall, as long as wisdom and knowledge overpower disbelief. The life which I had led initially as the ODH's leader, in truth, differed little from that of other people. Carefree, I could await the new day, and there was no overarching threat to me. The tasks of my group consisted of simply banning as many Kondo players as possible, hence of a world having little relation to the corruption of Kon leaders. For, strange as it may seem at first glance, the divide between Kondo players and Kon leaders is often further than we imagine. The reason for this division lies in the primary appeal, often ignored by most Kondo players as their desires extend into the games alone. In contrast, the Kon leaders value profit or social status among the Kondo groups, driving them to exploit the impulsive. To this, we must note the repulsive memory of the weak restraint of this community, the short-lived satisfaction of their social experiences, their exploitation by selfish Kon leaders, however significant they may be long-term, all driving towards the intolerable profits of Roblox Kondo community. Similarly, I learned that the higher ranks in a vast majority of groups, including anti-Kondo groups, feel more restrictions in dealing with their group members than seemed possible to the prodigy. For anyone who rises by their own efforts into a higher position is faced with enough struggle to hinder consideration for others. Our own painful struggle for a long-lasting impact destroys our empathy towards the sense of futility left in our wake. Futility not just towards the group's ability to eliminate the Kondo community, but towards their potential to establish a powerful impact within the anti-Kondo community. In this respect, I am grateful for experiencing this. By naively approaching the Kondo community the same way I approached a lone group, I removed my blindness from the narrow vision that I previously believed was sufficient to eliminate Kondos. Only then did I learn to know the humanity of the anti-Kondo community, learning to distinguish the presence of empty objectives or inexperienced ideals from a true conviction. In summary, anti-Kondo users are using ineffective tactics, hence leading to their leaders' flawed shadows that the community rests within. A higher pedestal creates only a bigger shadow. Discussion is silent. Despite enabling far too much autonomy compared to the physical world, Roblox was, socially speaking, one of the most well-known reflections of human society. And Roblox does not intend to hide this at all. One of their engineers states,
"We are also investing in more realistic worlds. The Roblox engine models the real world, and we work to make materials and systems in Roblox behave as they would in our physical world."
And they have succeeded in more than appearance alone. User avatars will determine a sharp contrast between those with Robux and those without. In the central games you could feel the pulse of this realm of millions, with all the dubious magic from the digital melting pot. The potential of financial gain from creating successful games attracted wealth and intelligence from around the world like a magnet. Added to this was the strong centralization of Roblox status as a business. They sought out any opportunity for advertisement in any form, from influencing investors to company partnerships. It offered the possibility of holding the entire world together commercially. But the consequence was an extraordinary range of users, from the generous to the malicious, within the platform. Yet not only was Roblox the center of the digital world commercially, but socially as well. The host of game designers and influencers was confronted by a larger army of enthusiastic users, often hiding trolls and profiteers, and side by side with wealth and fame laid conflicts and drama. In no other platform could its outcomes have been studied better. But few have managed to recognize that this studying cannot be done from afar. Only those who confront the serpent and are bitten by it can understand its venom. Without its sample, the only antidotes developed are superficial discussion and sentimental bystanding. The former never observes the problem's core, and the latter is often integrated into the problem. Both have been observed in previous attempts to combat Kondos. I cannot discern which is more dangerous towards the anti-Kondo community, obliviousness to the core roots of the problem, such as those witnessed within Roblox administration, or the purposeless reportings from influencers who seek to uphold their societal status more than they desire to take genuine action. In any event, even anti-condo groups such as the ODH rely on hindsight far more than their minds, overlooking any resolve to address the problem efficiently, are capable of realizing, and much to our own surprise, the result of our social efforts fail to exceed those we criticize. Thought this is passed off simply as Roblox moderation being terrible. Many are reluctant to realize that successful social endeavor shares no alliance with power nor popularity. Movements raise no claims to gratitude, never intending to distribute favors but instead to uphold rights. Even during the months of leading the ODH, I never realized that I was never meant to approach studying condo communities in such a way. By drawing me into a sphere of obscured power, I was not invited to experience but to solely theorize through others' mistakes. It was because of this that the wall was never tested to be inadequate at keeping out the weather. An attempt to, in detail, explain the sentiments I experienced in that period could never be anywhere near completion. I can describe the most essential impressions, those which often impacted my methods most significantly, and the many lessons which I derived from them at the time. No one understands the sun without experiencing its light. Discouragement is inspiring. The business of recruitment, even before and now, was difficult, since I was not a skilled communicator. Furthermore, my target audience seldom acted beyond their innate desire of establishing their impact within a single game, a desire rarely consistent or achieved. I adopted the attitude of those who seek the older days of Roblox, not knowing that the intentions for its existence were idealistic and flawed from the start. Descending into the old illusion of tradition presenting a safer environment, I snatched at every common ideal that offers itself, grasping at every sort of commonality with other users, progressing step by step towards the overdue realization that nostalgia, no matter what sort, hides the roots of Roblox's current flaws. I, too, was determined to unknowingly repeat the mistakes of our predecessors and fight my way towards the same outcome as today. I learned that while there was always some form of common interest to address, but unless it is preserved by determination and conviction, it was just as easy to disengage from it. The uncertainty of preserving public efforts against condos built up one of the darkest realizations of my life. The veteran anti-condo users do not find themselves losing their motivation as frequently as those newer to the community, but they are not entirely immune to this outcome either. And in their case, the loss of determination, owing to being overcome by boredom, is replaced by apathy or disdain against the anti-condo community. In this respect, the entire platform suffers bitterly from this individual's neglection of the conditions within Roblox community. The child who goes to this platform, attracted by the nature of endless games by shorted hours, but most of all the opportunity for social opportunity within the masses of groups, is accustomed to a certain reliance on temporary excitement and purpose. They leave their old purpose when there is the slightest opportunity for more success in a new one. For there is a great shortage of communities that remain alive for longer than a year. It is a mistake to believe that the user who participates, or even receives a promotion, in a big community is significantly different than their peer who continues to make a humble appearance in a small group. On the contrary, Experience shows that those ranked moderators or similarly in the largest communities, operated by content creators or developers, are little more memorable than a standard active member, especially when the community inevitably loses its appeal. Yet among these standard members we must address not only those who leave the community for another, but to an equal degree those who join it. They, too, are likely searching for an uncertain purpose to fulfill. As a rule, they have no need to lose heart on the first day, even if they have no method to communicate with the rest of the community. But it is worse if, after finding a community, the user soon leaves it. For a personalized community to retain growth, especially within changing trends, is difficult if not impossible. Even so, the first days are ripe with potential. The user, under proper management, receives initial benefits from remaining in their chosen group. But when their last speck of interest is gone and the group appears too repetitive, as is inevitable given changing the group's purpose accelerates its downfall, great hindrances to their dedication arise. Now the user once again wanders purposeless, sinking temporarily into other groups. The old story is repeated. The same thing happens a second time, a third time, and little by little they learn to bear their external dissatisfaction with greater indifference. This becomes a habit, regardless of the length of time they stay loyal to any group, nor their rank within it. And so this user, who may have been hard-working at one point, grows apathetic in their view of life and gradually becomes the instrument of those who use them for their advantage. They have so often been denied a significant purpose that they prioritize temporary satisfactions more than ever, even when this satisfaction includes the desires of immoral or detrimental impulse. They may not be exactly enthusiastic about illegal sexual activity, but at any rate they have become indifferent towards its prohibition. With open eyes I watched this process over thousands of examples. The more I witnessed it, the greater grew my revulsion for both the condo community's opportunistic exploitation and my determination to prevent myself from being drawn in and crushed by the same pattern. One moment, users claimed to care for Roblox. The next, they exploited its flaws remorselessly. An incompetent ally is more dangerous than an enemy. Loyalty is treacherous. I, too, had been tossed around by absence of belonging. I could feel the effects of this root on the human psychology. With it, the rapid change from group to groupless and vice versa, combined with the resulting repetition of hopelessness, end in destroying, in many, all feelings of necessity or motivation for adherence to order. It would seem that the user becomes accustomed to living off of impact in good times and excitement in bad times. Indeed, the desire for an impact in better times pitches a mirage of satisfaction and achievement, so irresistible that it cuts off the restraint and patience that makes it possible. The consequence is that once the user obtains power, they often irresponsibly forget all ideas of order and discipline, and manages based on emotion rather than logic. This upsets the motivation of its group members in turn, as even here any effective allure begins to decline. In the beginning, users subconsciously believe that leadership addresses their search for purpose and impact, only for someone to take this leadership and draw exclusively on the power it offers. And in the end, it is this disassociation from their members that accelerates a decline in interest within the group. Notably, this pattern occurs in any group not bound by tradition or desire. US psychologist Michael Hogg identifies that, contrary to popular belief,
leaders emerge not just by asserting dominance or showcasing specific traits, but by embodying the collective self-concept of the group. This alignment between a leader's qualities and the group's identity makes followers more likely to identify with the leader and, thus, follow them.
Obliviousness to this subconscious preference means that even those who witness a group's decline in power will be more than willing to repeat its process. Given that 56% of Roblox users are under 16 years of age, even the children, in their earliest beginnings, are made familiar with this disillusionment, but never on why it occurs. It ends far worse if the user goes their own way from the beginning and seeks personal satisfaction on Roblox rather than leadership. Some staff members, to preserve their group sense of significance, oppose the user. Then there is fighting and quarreling, and, as the user grows estranged from their group, they become more intimate with deriving pleasure from the fear and anger of others. They become selfish and corrupt, and, if the group leader is oblivious to this decline in responsibility, the staff team has to fight the user to preserve even the slightest order. And to make matters worse, it only preserves the integrity of the staff team when the fight occurs in public channels, forcing them to reveal the conflict among the significant members of the group. When the user eventually leaves the group, regardless of its condition, they are always going to carry disdain over its members, finding glory in only the misfortune of their former peers. I have seen this in hundreds of instances, but later I understood the whole inevitability of this spite and its deeper causes. These people are the rotting fruit, intentionally or otherwise, of a flawed social structure whose foundations will erode and become outclassed by another. Just as poorly thought out in those groups, especially those with a certain purpose, were the separation of relevant and irrelevant discussion. This lack of consistency accelerated the decline of the group's appeal, diluting the enthusiasm for its purpose with distractions towards other appealing content. Even as the ODH's leader, I recognize the importance of reinforcing reminders of our objective and routinely reinforced it. What was, and always will be, bound to happen someday, when the stream of chaos pours forth from the thoughtless condo communities to swallow up their miserable fellow users. For thoughtless they must be. Thoughtlessly they let themselves bathe in an over-reliance on desire, on instinct, and with their utter weakness they ignore that sooner or later these actions will return them to the same pattern of aimlessness, this time in a worse emotional condition than initially. It proved significant for my life to observe the pattern of chaos play out, not just online, but in school as well. In it I could no longer distort or suppress the threat of harmful social groups. They educated me quickly and thoroughly. If I did not wish to be swallowed up in the appeal of autonomy, I had to learn to distinguish between external characters, lives, and the foundations of their actions. Only then can understanding be born without harming dedication. Then, from all the disillusionment and confusion, from all the corruption and degeneracy, it was no longer human beings that emerged, but the machinations of flawed ideals. The harsh lessons in my life, illustrating the same patterns I see in hundreds of groups, preserved me from descending through sentimentality into the degenerate products of this development. No, to put yourself in their shoes is not necessarily the way to safely understand these issues. Even then I saw only two factors that can successfully improve these conditions. The deepest sense of social responsibility for creating better foundations for our development, combining with brutal determination in eliminating incurable infections. Just as evolution disregards preservation of a species and its flaws, but in developing adaptations to counter these flaws. Likewise, humanity's values, which are propagated by their environment at young, are effectively consolidated by eliminating existing vices. The trouble with loyalty to a cause is that the cause always betrays you. Justice is biased. During my struggles as the ODH's leader, it had become clear to me that social movements must never be directed towards promoting welfare and benevolence alone, but rather towards eliminating the deficiencies in our societal and cultural life, which will more often than not lead to the individual's degeneration accelerating. The difficulty of applying appropriate punishments against criminals, those who corrupt the youth, lie not in the judgment of their inner motives or cause. This misconception is commonly founded in our own sense of guilt regarding repression of the corrupt, paralyzing any serious decision and thus contributes to propagating human hesitance, diluting the most necessary measures of societal preservation. Only when a society ceases to subconsciously follow guilt over punishing others will it achieve the inner calm and strength necessary to permanently prune the wild shoots and tear out the weeds. Since roadblocks seldom demonstrated legislative enforcement, its weakness in combating their most glaring flaws was illustrative and reflective of the public's tendency to misdirect responsibility. I do not know what horrified me the most, the growing indifference of my peers, the ethical manipulation of roadblocks, or the lowering impact of awareness. How often does roadblocks repeat their approach despite hearing a news article declare that condos remain a problem on roadblocks, that condo groups are equally determined to bypass moderation, as long as it gives con leaders a consistent income? The absence of consequential enforcement is most profoundly disapproved even by the public, and horror at repeating the methods that have never succeeded is raised just as repetitively. How many people have asked themselves what was the real reason people preserved the condo industry? How many are aware of the role of human nature in propagating the pursuit of autonomy, whose total result on the gullible is excessive indulgence in carnal desires? How many suspect to how great an extent pride in roadblocks varies depending on knowledge of its capacity in all fields? Does the roadblocks community, as a whole, ever stop to consider the absurdly small extent of pride in this platform which is omitted from the full picture? Let us not try to condone this by saying it is no better in other social media platforms, and that in those platforms sexual activity is not against the TOS. Even if this were so, it is no excuse for roadblocks' own oversights. But it is not so. For the platform most used for social connection, most effective at transmitting degenerative ideas to the widest range of youth, and the bridge between every other social media platform whom you designate as no better, is nothing other than an enabler for the worst of nature. The fact is that the young user is not fully prepared for the subjective life, but is instilled with only the preference for their most objective view, often the view of immediate gratification. Their education has always been limited to general and broad values, which must be engraved in the memories and feelings of people and their repetitions. But the dangers of omission have added the potential for corrupting the human components that the youth have successfully empathized with. The vermin that ethically poison the roadblocks community strike at even this little from the heart and memory of the masses, the little that have not been removed by apathy and countless returns to futility. Imagine, for instance, the following scene. In a family of 5, all 3 children, named Russell, Itari, and Jermaine, have access to roadblocks. This is the age in which the first impressions are made on the consciousness of the child. The talented retain traces of this memory even at old age. Back in the family, the 3 children will inevitably pursue any factor to differentiate themselves from their siblings. The sheer competitive nature and race for status, be it skill or finances, will frequently birth quarreling and conflict. In these circumstances, the children will not live with each other, they will try to assert themselves above each other. Inevitably, they will apply a social status to their desire for achievement, as is already consistent with their desire for superiority. And where better to record and grow this status than on Roblox, a platform with at least one community that appeals to each sibling. Retaining their competitive factor, each sibling will scour for more methods to make friends, groups, communities, all to gain an edge over their siblings. But as we learn from many groups, accompanying communities are a sense of swift disillusionment. Users will eventually leave the group, searching for something with a more innate appeal. Germaine, losing her group's popularity, will search for and adopt that innate appeal, which requires exploitation of human nature. And when Germaine looks upon the most popular communities, the life of successful YouTuber or notable game designer is often out of her reach. Therefore, the easiest option for a quickly growing group would be a condo group. She will assume that qualities for high member counts take the form of propagating innate desires. And if the condo players get banned, they will return in an alternate account and increase the group member count by 1. Morally poisoned and developing corrupted values, Germaine continues on her path as a Roblox condo group leader. Eventually, this was discovered by her parents, who forbid her from playing Roblox. Russell and Atari expect that Germaine's absence will weaken her group, but to their shock, Germaine's condo group continues to grow even without their founder's absence. And so, the other two, still searching for methods to outcompete each other, form condo groups of their own, perceiving it as a path to success with minimal effort required. As for Germaine, she is torn between their parents' moral values and their siblings' social values. Meanwhile, the very same parents, even in the presence of their children, are more inclined to curse out Roblox than to take their offspring and teach them some sense. By cursing out the very same platform that the three siblings use to construct their sense of value, the parents accumulate disdain from Germaine, Atari, and Russell, all this stemming from the con leader's manipulation. By the time the three siblings reach adolescence, it is hard to decide what is stronger in them: their reliance on their condo groups for a sense of value, or their resentment against their parents, all combining with the rush of power they gain from immorality and insolence. In what position are their parents, who prefer to criticize outside influences rather than their own children, and to remove the impact of condos, which have emerged far into generational values? Everyone's directing their blame on those who try to protect their children, when the malicious culprits are right there. All three children have now transformed into propagators of ethical corruption. Thus, the issue is that children rather than parents are targeted by and proliferates the condo industry, who prompts and exploits these faults in the first place. The same cycle occurs in family after family, and friend group after friend group, and their peers are then amazed at their story of success and independence, giving their generation the final polish to unite against prior authority. This story, as improbable as it may seem, is a reflection of the aftermath of World War I. Germaine, or Germany, had grown in both strength and disdain for those in power after being restricted by the Treaty of Versailles. Russell and Atari, Russia and Italy respectively, observed Germany's strength and assisted the Axis powers. Even the 1917 Russian Revolution, occurring during World War I, reflects Russell's departure from a standard Roblox group and establishment of a condo group, a representation of excessive freedom. And the story doesn't stop there. Day after day, in movies, literature, and the press, they see the sweet poison of autonomy being poured into people by bucketfuls, and then are surprised when this autonomy results in chaos and immorality. As though autonomy in its purest form does not contradict justice. What I had never suspected before, I quickly learned that promoting a healthy and powerful culture is a question of upholding consistent social values. Those who yearn to know the necessities of cultural and social greatness can and will achieve the inner strength and privilege of contributing to the reinforcement of societal order. And I can fight only for something that I respect only what I believe in, and believe in only what I know. Everyone is delusional to some extent. This is referred to as bias. Everyone is delusional to some extent. This is referred to as bias. Once my interest in social patterns was sparked, I began to study it with all thoroughness. It was a new and relevant world opened before me. In my earlier years as the ODH's leader, my own situation had changed as I was now searching for ways to keep my group active, believing it necessary to the destruction of condos. By this time, I was working alongside a small group of staff members. Hard as this was with regard to the fragility of human motivation, it was sufficient to continue on, good for the efficiency of an anti-condo group. Now I was mastering my own time and learning to apportion it better than previously had been possible. I hosted reporting events and raids as group activities while studying psychology out of interest. Thus I was able to supplement my visual instruction in the social problem through theoretical study. I studied every book and website I saw relevant against the condos, and outside of those I reflected on the condo players' thoughts. I believe that those who knew me in those days took me for obsessive, as was only natural. I served my interest in learned with unmatched dedication. It seemed to me that under my circumstances, my concern was not needless study, but the greatest fascinations of my pursuit. I could interview condo players the whole day, and never grow tired. Thus my faith grew that my dream for the future would become realistic after all, regardless of the years required. I am firmly convinced that I will someday make a name for myself as the catalyst to the condo community's elimination. In addition, I had the greatest interest in everything connected to persuasion, but this did not seem to me very significant. On the contrary, in my eyes, active opposition against the condo community was the self-evident duty of every member of society. Anyone who failed to understand its necessity lost the right to criticism or complaint. In this field, I studied only for the purposes of supplementing my psychological interest. I know of people who are well-prepared public speakers, yet whom I would not describe as competent in this field. True, they possess a mass of knowledge, but the common speaker is unable to apply this knowledge on the spot, when necessary to convince a person who doubts their abilities. They focus so much on reciting their speeches that they never learn to distinguish what is most valuable for them. For speaking abilities are means to an end, but not the end in itself. It should fill the framework aligning various talents and abilities, while providing the tools required for the speaker's work. Additionally, the speaker needs to recognize the general worldview. In both instances, it is essential that the content within a speech should never be instantly attributed to the speaker's memory or beliefs, but rather place it in the correct frame before further decisions are made. Otherwise, the speech applies a confusing compound of worthless facts, which also raise undeserving pride in the speaker. This is due to the fact the speaker now believes themselves to be educated, when in all reality, they grow further and further removed from the world until they swindle their way into high positions. From there, never will the speaker succeed in drawing the correct tools from their confused knowledge to adequately identify and address the current demands, for their knowledge is not organized along the results of reality, but in the sequence of their unshakable delusions which have occupied vital positions in their brain. And since the speaker is too prideful to adapt, they will encounter the most terrible embarrassment, casting irrelevance around aimlessly, and with certainty will stubbornly cling to the wrong formulas. If this were false, it would be impossible for us to understand the contradictory behavior of those in higher status, from the current Kondo group leaders to David Basaki himself, unless we assumed outright villainy rather than pathological factors. On the other hand, the humble speaker who seeks to identify their core contributing components will, in studying texts of any form, instinctively and immediately perceive anything which is worth remembering, because they recognize that it is suited to their purpose or useful for general applications. Once this knowledge is correctly coordinated with the existing picture of the subject, it will function as supportive or oppositional evidence, thus enhancing the accuracy or clarity of human understanding respectively. Then, if some unforeseen question is set upon the subject, the adequate speaker will immediately take the existing picture as a pattern, and from it will extract all the factors regarding this question, assembled over decades, to apply an examination or reconsideration until the question has been accounted for. Only this kind of speaker will retain meaning and purpose. Anyone who does not provide their intelligence with the necessary foundation will never be in a position to defend his viewpoint from the face of opposition, regardless of whether the viewpoint is true to contemporary society. In every discussion will their memory treacherously destabilize the grounds for reinforcing their viewpoint nor any for countering those of their adversaries. When the incompetent speaker is placed onto leadership and power by good fortune, we receive uncertainty and chaos. Since my unexpected promotion to the ODH as leader, I have endeavored to learn in the correct way, and in this endeavor I have been most fortunately supported by memory and intelligence. Viewed in this light, the experiences alongside my staff team provided applications for my constantly renewed study of various Kondo-related solutions. Thus I was at last able to compare reality to theory and test theory by repeating reality. In this period, the experiences motivated me to the most thorough study of Kondo player psychology in addition to the question of their preservation on roadblocks. Who knows if I would have fallen into the same corruption of selfishness and immorality had my work with the ODH not thrust the problem at me all at once. No teacher ever stops being a student. Defense is vulnerability. What I knew of Kondo players specifically was, while accurate, comparatively little. I was profoundly pleased that it was sufficient to carry on my actions against Kon members, while simultaneously learning about Kondo groups and players. For even then I was informed that this must help to weaken the Kondo community which I so hated. In the conviction that roadblocks could never function without preventing users from being exploited in some way, but that even the price of a complete focus on monetization by no means provided a guarantee of external retribution. Since the power of roadblocks moderation was criticized by both the public, the news, and research organizations as exceedingly dubious, I sought out applications for every development to weaponize against the impact of Kondo groups, as they would inevitably lead to the collapse of roadblocks in one way or another. In this way, the most immediate action can be taken to eliminate the platform that the Kondo games rely heavily on to survive. The longer that ethical and legal issues rise from this chaotic platform, the further it demonstrates the power of money in warping the values of society, and with it the very corruption that the anti-Kondo community seeks to prevent. In this way, the significance of my studying, despite leading the ODH, is consistently restored. Certainly, This potential redundancy of morals is a displeasing outcome. The fact that it stemmed from an endless hunger for freedom seemed to support this decline rather than clash with it. What most disgusted me was the growing indifference towards the struggle for the fight against the condo community, few adopting the motivation to contribute until it directly affects them. Thus, at the age of 14, I barely differentiated between enabler and propagator. Here again it required circumstance to recognize how complacency, when in a community of those dedicated to a goal, is similar to betraying aforementioned community. Up to that time I had thought that allowing members to choose their contribution freely was insignificant to the group's activity. But now, having obtained insight into human mentality and the nature of their objectives, I recognize the products of keeping a group's muscle stationary for too long. And in a few months I obtained what might otherwise have required decades: an understanding of the ODH's full potential, though the method of addressing it continues to cloak itself. My first encounter with an indifferent figure owned a Roblox group that condo players used for inappropriate messages. It could only be described as a condo infestation, when con members, condo game players or group members, gain significant control over a non-condo group or game, and use it for sexual purposes. From the very beginning it was a common and unpleasant outcome for inactive groups. When contacting them, my intention was more or less straightforward, my speech concise, and my manner reserved. I was still so busy with trying to remove the condo infestation that I could not concern myself with the behaviors of the very owners I talked to. They had taken action only to avoid being dragged into the conflict, only to distance themselves from the condo and anti-condo communities. Perhaps I would not have concerned myself at all with my unintentional impact if on the third or fourth group I had eventually failed. The owner had willingly converted her group to a condo group and excommunicated all efforts against it. My knowledge of group owners' disillusionment, notably after failing to reach significance through traditional means, was at the time non-existent. I could not have realized nor proven that choosing the path of group size over adequate control was either beneficial or harmful. When I saw the drastic changes to the converted group, the owner refused to provide any reason. At first I thought they might not have understood the matter, but now it may be a greater possibility that she didn't want to be forced into anything. Perhaps my first assumption accounts for my refusal to give up on the matter immediately. I had hoped to enlighten the owner and break down her resistance in a few days. In any event, she had made a big mistake. In less than 2 weeks the group and owner's account were both banned. In less than 2 weeks I came to grow familiar with the threat of indifference, and no power in the world could have moved me to depart from offering assistance to groups whose condo player members have come to appear to me as an illness that must be cured from groups. During these days I had grown irritable towards group owners oblivious to their condo infestations. Week by week their number always increased, the reason hidden from understanding until later. On these occasions alliances were sometimes discussed. From a distance, I cautiously studied my potential associates or reflected on their group's miserable circumstances. Nevertheless, I had learned more than enough, and often it seemed that they purposefully distanced themselves from any activities under the ODH, perhaps in order to preserve their self-perception as a leader than a follower. In any case, what I heard discussed behind my back was of such a nature as to infuriate me to the extreme. These users rejected everything I experienced: the prevalence of condo groups on Roblox, the condo industry as an instrument for exploiting those with weak willpower, the significance of enforcement as a means for maintaining discipline, etc. There was absolutely nothing which was not drawn through the mud of a terrifying depth. At first I tried to keep silent. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, that they did not mean any of this. But at length it became impossible. I failed to oppose them when I should have. Regardless, it would be utterly hopeless until I possessed crucial knowledge of their controversial points. And so I began to examine the sources from where they drew this supposed worldview. I studied book after book, testimony after testimony. From then on, any discussions with these group owners were often very heated. I argued back, from day to day better structured than my peers concerning their knowledge, until they made use of the weapon which most readily conquers digital reason, propagating futility and disbelief. Since I was isolated from the values of other groups, I left filled with disgust, but at the same time so agitated that it remained impossible for me to turn my back on my objective. No, after the first surge of indignation, my dedication regained the upper hand. I was determined to continue clearing Kondo players from other groups in spite of my experience. In this decision I was reinforced by the realization I had let my emotions get the better of me, rather than using them as an effective tool. This is why the same old story repeated and ended the same as the group that was converted into a Kondo group. What differentiates us from animals is that we don't just act on what is most comfortable. We don't act on impulse alone. We act on what is most beneficial. I wrestled with my original beliefs. Are Kon members human, capable of developing convictions of their own? A painful question, for if the answer is yes, then my struggle for order no longer aligns with the experiences and studies that we invest for those who reaped what others sowed. If the answer is no, our current generation is losing the ability to define what the benefits of human nature are. On these days of reflection, I anxiously pondered on the masses who never fought for anyone other than themselves, seeing them swell to the proportions of a terrible army. With little changed feeling I now gazed at the endless instances of hypocritical analysts falling to the same mistakes as their predecessors. For years, innate pride and prejudice left its mark throughout the records of time. Even in my daily news, I had not been able to bring myself to spend more than 2 minutes of deliberation on crime after crime. Between 2023 and 2024, 340,681 annual offenders indicates an average of 834 criminals per day. Disillusioned with instinct and desire, my exposure to the daily disorder enabled me to study their aspects and thought processes. For the glorified value of being human, constructed upon phrases of freedom, beauty, and dignity in common culture, differs heavily from the evidence presented by the news, illustrating the villainy and lies that could swallow us at any moment. The former, addressed to the middle and upper social class, significantly the educated. The latter, to the very masses employing every opportunity to slander those above and drag them down. For me, immersion in the literature and news meant navigating my way throughout the responsibilities as the ODH's leader. What had seemed to me an irreparable flaw became the source of a greater dedication than before. Only the fool can be exposed to the work of corrupt communities and still ridicule the victims. The more I grew the ODH in the next few months, the clearer my perspective, hence my insight into the motives behind Kondo players' actions. I now understood the significance of the brutal consequences that I witnessed both digitally and in reality. The interest of the masses are not attracted to the half-hearted, despite embodying this very trait. They will choose a commander more than a petitioner and feel inwardly more relevant by enforcing a belief than by promoting liberalistic freedom, in which they contribute little and are vulnerable to the feeling of irrelevance. They are equally unaware of their daily terrorization and the growing abuse of human freedom, for they are seldom exposed to the inner contradictions of societal values. All they see is the ruthless force and brutality of true autonomy, to which they pursue regardless of its negative impacts. If ideals are opposed by truth in a bitter struggle, the truth will always outclass ideals in sustainable benefits. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Autonomy is restrictive. Less than 5 months had passed before the intermediate theory around the growth of the condo community were clear to me. I understood their consequences that this industry propagates, particularly on the future generations, which are neither morally nor mentally resistant to such attacks. At any opportunity it unleashes a barrage of lies and slander against whatever opposes their perception of freedom, until the nerves of the victims break down and, just to isolate themselves from the problem, they sacrifice the only solution. However, the complacent will never keep their peace. The game begins and repeats until the pressure of both sides' consequences results in suggestive paralysis. Since the condo group leaders best know the value of emotional exploitation, they most spitefully slander those in whose nature they detect internal strength they lack. Conversely, condo groups praise the absence of individual restraint, sometimes cautiously, others loudly, depending on each player's situation. They value the unassertive, spineless schemer over a forceful nature of intelligence. But with the greatest enthusiasm they gather weaklings in mind and force. They know how to create the illusion that autonomy alone is a functional value for society, and at the same time, they weaponize it in one argument after another. Sometimes to justify their own actions, sometimes to bring other users into the condo community, thus shamelessly exploiting an overrated trait. This is a tactic that preys on conflicting values, and its result will lead to warping what is right and wrong, unless the opposing side learns to combat uncertainty with conviction. It is our duty, as humans, to inform the vulnerable that this is a question of strength or temptation. I achieved an equal understanding of the importance of recognizing why so many fail their battle and become condo players. Here, too, the psychological effect can be calculated with precision. Other condo players insisting on immediate intimacy, and on occasion, becoming involved in someone's mass ridicule unless opposed by blackmail or incriminating evidence. In either case, to be sure, the condo group will always find someone else to blame. Though they have long despised the presence of discipline, they will set up scapegoats while directed by that same discipline, and in most cases will eagerly seek group involvement if it appeals to their desires. Amid the general confusion, condo groups will find some idiot who, in the goal to capture the favor of their impulsive members, will propagate further illegal activity within their condo group, such as hate crimes and doxing. The impression made by such a success on both the condo and anti-condo communities can only be measured from the soul of people, not from studies, but from experience. For while among their supporters the victory sought seems a single triumph of their own values, their leaders continue to despair the success of any further threat to their power. The more familiar I become with this despair, the slower I will recognize these patterns of the thousands of Roblox group owners who succumb to it. What made me most regretful about my time leading the ODH is that to be given back to my people, I had to be separated from the illusion of higher autonomy under group leadership. I had been taught to distinguish the victims from their seducers, but was ultimately blinded to the possibility it occurs on both sides. The results of seduction by a group can only be pictured as victims. For if I attempted to write a few books about my life, even if they depict the essence of corruption in the condo community, The picture would not be complete without the recognition that in my leadership my failure to overcome the weakness of attachment further drove my determination to never be hindered by this weakness again. Leaders need to be able to sacrifice those that are loyal to them, with a single-minded determination towards efficiency and modesty. Even though this ability is certainly vanishing in the younger generation, if only through the general effects of the digital world, there are many who have managed to overcome their foul vices of innate nature. If these good, often kind people still became corrupted by the Kondo community, the reason was that they failed to understand the foundations of their strength and success, with no one taking the trouble to inform them about their shortcomings, combining with their dissuasion from experiencing the same exhausting determination again. Their obliviousness to their valuable conviction resented by Kondo groups, are what drove them into the abyss of impulsive indulgence. Since on innumerable occasions contemporary society have reinforced their morals clumsily and often contradictorily, many of the most upstanding witnesses were driven away from their values and into the audience of complacency. Hundreds of individuals, I'm sure, started out as enemies of the Kondo community in alignment to their inner values, but their resistance was ineffective in a way which was self-induced, when the Roblox company overconfidently reassured the redundancy of social activity towards an extremely small subset of users. Their simple, inflexible rejection of all efforts to better Roblox conditions, to advance safety filters that have proven their failure time and time again, to limit social interactions for younger users when it only drives their hunger for these interactions, all this and more which shamelessly wove an illusion of safety while the younger generation becomes more intimate with the Kondo community. Never can Roblox administration make effective its attempts in this direction, for by resisting external assistance to eliminate the corruption of societal values, they sowed disdain while seeming to justify even the assertions of the Roblox community's enemies, to the effect that not even the anti-Kondo community can accurately represent the best path to consistent justice. To begin with, the traditional methods of stopping Kondo groups were reports and raids. In my years as the ODH's leader, I mistakenly regarded them as the only and ideal methods to oppose the Kondo community. And in correcting this misconception in understanding, experience became my instructor. I had learned to distinguish between a strategy which was only reliable for bark and no bite, and a strategy which applied bite scars without a single bark. The fact that Kondo group leaders understood the limited tools of Roblox community assured it of their preservation and success. The fact that the anti-Kondo community is not aware of this could cost them their efficiency. They thought they could stop an industry running on impulse through impulsive developments, but in reality they only redirected it into illogical pathways. To mistake awareness for impact is nonsensical yet commonly believed. If the effectiveness of spreading awareness relies heavily on the response of its audience, the method is not only unreliable and proven ineffective against futility or disbelief, but depriving the recruiter of an opportunity to seek a stronger method. For in this way it reinforces the flawed premises with which a permanent solution cannot grow from. In contrast, assertive awareness embodies quality over quantity. When used correctly, it eliminates social cankers, curing intellectual infections and illusions, and thus contributing much more to the general willpower of the anti-Kondo community. When questioned about the necessity of repressing the Kondo players' freedoms, as long as the user applies enough societal understanding and reasoning, further rejection would illustrate a deficient sense of justice and selflessness. It is the right and duty of humans to protect the structure and values of the general public against the greed and irrationality of the corrupt, against those who twist the of the Roblox community as a whole. From the disastrous effects of unchecked vice propagates profound disorder for the future. To eliminate the causes of such a development is to service our generation and far from the opposite. Let no one say that individuals have the autonomy to draw the consequences from injustice. This is an attempt to divert attention and will not hold up when you are directly impacted. If the elimination of condo communities serves the interests of Roblox, the struggle against injustice must be fought with shields forged from hope and swords forged from success. Individuals are never in a position to defend themselves from the power of the condo industry on first encounter. For such matters we need to lend them both superior justice and superior power. Thus, even someone as inexperienced in combating condo groups as the ODH's second leader understands a group's role in strengthening the social values and its practical effects on personal life, and thereby overcoming obstacles which are constantly giving rise to vice and contradictions. If this is not the case, it is to no small extent the failure of those who have the power to directly obstruct the social evils or thwart them by legislative enforcement. Proportionally, as Roblox administration failed to, or rejected to, understand the importance of the digital world on socializing generational beliefs. Thus, it creates a foundation of neglect and anarchy which on several occasions had dismantled the supports built onto it. In the way the truth of human nature was submerged from those propagating autonomy, it never occurred to Roblox to limit the corruption that is growing behind its back. Regardless of the anti-condo community's alignment with Roblox intentions, the weapon for defending the values and justice crucial to society had, in inflexible hands, become no more significant at propagating change than a reality TV show. And they seldom sought to understand and explain the fallacies behind a complete departure from the anti-condo community. For in society, willpower and strength always conflicts with emotion and the desire for further autonomy, something that is observable in both sides in the fight against condos. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are.